Welcome r/Nuclearrevenge. The time my dad aided in committing a murder. This has recently come to my attention through a family gathering, but it happened over 20 years ago. I live in good old sunny Portugal, in the Algarve to be more precise, and in the summertime we do what we do best, which is spend entire days at the beach with our families. At the time I was 16 and my brother was 4, and we had a friendly neighbor family which was basically our second family, and they had 2 daughters aged 12 and 6. Mariah and Rita, not real names obviously. Now, we basically spend every single waking moment together, since we literally live a few meters from each other, and our parents were pretty much inseparable, and would spend their own time together, since my dad was a fisherman, still is, and the girl's dad was also fisherman. Our mothers would do what mothers do together and cook, gossip, and whatnot. I was only 1 year old when we moved to the neighborhood, and a few days later, the other family moved in, and since we were literally the very first people to move to that neighborhood, it was a brand spanking new community still with half the brand new houses for sale. My parents befriended them very quickly. 4 years later, their first daughter was born, and I suddenly had a very loud and very active play friend as she grew up. Despite our age difference, we actually got along just fine, and over the years we grew closer and closer, and with our siblings being born, we were as brother and sister as they come. Like I said before, summer days were spent in the beach, and this is where it all began. One day mid-afternoon, we were all at the beach playing as usual when came to us and asked us if we had seen Rita, since she was nowhere to be found. We said we hadn't seen her, and the last time we saw her she was playing with some children right next to our towel spot. Her dad was frantically looking for her, and my dad was looking worried too. The next hour was spent looking for Rita, while Mariah was already crying because her sister was missing. My hair was pounding because this had never happened before, and they were both like my own sisters. Finally, after almost 90 minutes searching, she had made her way towards us and said she was playing with a few kids behind some rocks in the distance. This particular beach we were at was amazing, and at high tide, it was a swim paradise, but at low tide, all the huge rocks and boulders formed by the tides were visible and were awesome for some hide and seek opportunities. No second thought was given, and we all went home. Later that night, Rita's dad came to our home in tears and extremely furious. Turns out, Rita had been sexually assaulted by someone at the beach and was threatened with death if she was ever to tell anyone. Rita's mom found out when she was giving her bath and discovered her bodysuit. She wore one of these because her skin is a bit sensitive to the sun, had a cut in the crotch area big enough to reveal her privates, and there was blood all over it. She was immediately rushed to the hospital where the suspicions were confirmed that she was indeed assaulted. Even her dad was made a suspect after talking to the police, but was released after his wife's testimony. He was furious. There was someone at that beach we go to for years that has been snatching and raping little girls. After he talked to the police, they said there was nothing they could do since there was no DNA or evidence. Apparently this accused a condom, and that the best they could do was send out a patrol to the beach, but the presence of uniformed officers would scare away the rapist. Days had passed, and the behavior of Rita changed immensely, and she started avoiding me and any other boys in the neighborhood. She would get extremely scared around adults, even to the point of peeing herself and crying uncontrollably. I didn't understand what was happening because during this whole ordeal, I was completely oblivious to what had happened to her. I only found out 20 years later. I knew something was wrong since I had overheard both our moms crying over it, but I didn't know what it was. So both our dads started plotting revenge and to end that pervert's reign of terror. One night, as they were talking to each other about what they could do about it, Mariah had sneaked out of her room and overheard everything. She approached them and said, "Is this about the man that hurt Rita? I can help." They both stared at her and told her to go to bed and forget what she heard. Mariah insisted and said that she wanted the man that hurt her sister to just disappear. The next weekend, the 3 of them went to the beach without the knowledge of the rest of us and started exacting the revenge. Mariah acted as bait, and despite being 11 she was barely any taller than Ritter, so she could pass as a 6 or 7-year-old, and as she played near the rocks, it was low tide, both our dads watched her from afar like hawks. Sure enough, 15 minutes later there was someone beckoning at her from behind a rock, and as scared she was, she approached the person. Our dads saw this, and ran towards her. What they saw sent shivers down their spines. In the short amount of time it took them to get there, Mariah was already gagged, and her bikini bottoms were down her ankles and the pervert was ready too. He had a knife in his hand, which both our dads promptly took from him. They said he tried to make some excuses about how he found her like that, and he was going to help her, but those were literally his last words. Over the course of what they said felt like hours, but was less than 5 minutes, they proceeded to beat the shit out of him, gagged him, stabbed him in his junk, bashed his head against the rocks over and over again, until he was still. Then Ritter's dad dealt the last blow, and stabbed him in the throat, leaving him there as he gurgled his last breath. They left the beach and Mariah was shaking, having almost experienced an assault like her sister. She started sobbing and crying in the car, but her dad managed to calm her down, and assured her that her sister had been avenged. She didn't understand what had happened, but she was calm. When they got home, she was made to promise never to tell a soul, and this was their secret, until now. 2 days later the news of the body of an unknown sex offender that had been on the run was discovered next to a beach in Spain, and there were no suspects, since he was badly decomposed. Apparently the high tide came soon after and took him away, which was a blessing to our dads. Ritter still has nightmares to this day, but has had the fortune of marrying a wonderful man that helps and supports her, and Mariah carried this secret up to this day when she shared the story along with our dads. We were shocked, and my mom was furious at my dad because he could have been arrested and our family torn apart. Ritter's mom started crying and begged her husband to tell her he was lying and that she couldn't believe her husband was a murderer. Mariah intervened and says she was as much an accomplice as our dads. Ritter was not present as she was in the hospital delivering her first baby, and we all agreed never to tell her anything. Multiple plot holes in your creative writing. You said you were left in the dark about what happened, but the 12-year-old sister was clued in and then offered herself to help. You first write Mariah is 12, then switch back to 11. 12-year-olds do not look like 6-year-olds. The police knows about the guy, but says there is nothing they can do because the guy used a condom. What about other witnesses? You write that the body of the sex offender was found 2 days later and was already decomposed beyond recognition. Very implausible. The dads would be major suspects in the following investigation. The 12-year-old is only traumatized by the attempted sexual assault, but not by the murder she just witnessed. I'm usually against vigilantism, but since they caught the pervert in the act it is justifiable. I probably would have done something similar if that were my sister. There are some people that just need to be put down because they are a real danger to society. A thief can be reformed, a real murderer can reform and ask for forgiveness. But pedophiles, I'm not talking about those fuckers who sit in their computers all day getting hard over children. I'm talking about the people who go out their way to harm others so they can fill their pedometer. They need to be put down. Morally? Probably not. The pedo got what he deserved and that's that. Legally, however, Op should be very careful about how he/she phrases this story. This post is effectively a testimony to a premeditated murder. Without it, assuming they were to get caught, the two dads could claim they caught the pedo mid-assault and beat him to death. There would be little to no legal repercussions for that, and while it's still probably illegal, you'd be pretty unlucky if you got convicted of anything. But how the story is told here, the truth, is very much illegal. This is premeditated murder 100%. A good lawyer might be able to argue it down to third-degree murder or even manslaughter, since it's a crime of passion, but the dad still would certainly face a couple years jail time minimum. The daughter too possibly, although that's a much easier case to argue, since she was too young to understand the implications at the time. Great revenge story, and I'm happy the asshole got what he deserved. I'm just saying posting an account of what happened on the internet is pretty risky because it gets rid of any deniability you had. Granted, I doubt anyone is looking for this piece of shit's killer, but better safe than sorry.